The Simpsons, Season 1. Every Simpsons fan I know would say that the first season isn't the best place to start if you're getting into it. Everyone can kind of agree that this isn't really part of the golden age of the show. And I get it, Season 1 has a lot of rough moments and it definitely doesn't reach the height that the show will eventually grow towards. Here are my thoughts on the episodes within the first season of the show. The Simpsons roasting on an open fire. The first episode of the show is a strong tone setter for the rest of the series. In a way, it could be viewed as a thesis statement of sorts. It introduces the family as a more realistic portrayal of the American middle class than what was previously shown on TV during the time and in previous sitcoms. They financially struggle. The entire plot of the episode is Homer trying as hard as he can to give his family a good Christmas because he didn't get his bonus check. And that's a very noble goal for a character, as it shows us from the start how much Homer cares and loves his family, and the lengths he will go to make them happy, while still bringing out his own rough personality to the forefront. The rest of the family, mostly Bart, are given their raw characterizations, which are explored deeper and deconstructed later in the show's run more so. But more importantly, this episode shows the heart that the show has and has potential to have. Santa's Little Helper's introduction to the family shows that while the family may be a bunch of misfits and sometimes losers, they deeply care for each other, and as families go, that's enough. Bart the Genius. The first character study episode. I think it's because the characterizations are still a little rough. The Homer-Bart relationship, as well as the fact that Lisa is still in very much less developed form, as well as the fact that Lisa is still in her very much less developed form. But I always felt this episode is kind of the closest link between the show as it exists in Season 1 and the Tracy Ullman shorts. It just has that more zany tone for me, but the plot feels kind of like a sitcom as well. It makes apparent that the show is still in its early form. Homer's Odyssey. Probably the worst of the first season. Besides Homer getting his job as the safety inspector, which would be his main job throughout the rest of the series, nothing much really happens in this episode. Homer nearly kills himself and he goes on a safety rally, but that's kind of it. It's okay, but with the really dark subject matter and bland animation, it's a clear rough patch in the season. There's No Disgraces Home. Probably one of the more iconic episodes of the first season, mainly just due to the image of the family in Marvin Monroe's chairs, which is as iconic an image as any in the show's run. It's definitely the first one I think of when I think of Season 1. The plot itself is solid. Homer wants the family to act more proper and leads them to an electroshock family therapy where they eventually learn their dysfunction makes them who they are. It's sweet. Homer's a bit out of character in this one, but it's good for the first season. Bart the General. Now this is a highlight episode for me. It's probably the most tightly written episode of the season. It's funny, has some fun references to war movies, and this is also the episode that sets up Nelson as Bart's main antagonist, which is something that is flip-flopped to hell and back. But it was a good idea, and the episodes executed the idea very well. It's just a particularly solid episode for the era. Moaning Lisa. And then there's this. What I probably would consider to be the best episode of the season. Much like Bart the Genius, it's a character piece, but this time it's just much better. It's based on Lisa being sad and feeling bad for that, but what's good about it is how it manages to actually quite deftly balance what could be a very depressing story of a child failing to understand her emotions with actual funny moments and uplifting ones too. This episode feels most of what was to come, especially with Lisa episodes. And I don't think it's too much of a leap to find Lisa's substitute in here the next season. And I don't think it's too much of a leap to find Lisa's substitute appearing in the next season. Call of the Simpsons. Okay, so after two bangers, we get this. It's okay, it's a silly little episode. Its main drawing point being the comedy, the setup of the one-sided rivalry between Homer and Ned, and probably most importantly Albert Brooks showing up, one of the greatest guest stars in the entire series. It's fine. It's a watchable throwaway episode. The Telltale Head. What this episode does best is explore the character of Bart pretty well. It shows that much of what he does is due to how it makes him appear. He very deeply cares about how others perceive him, and this is a part of his personality which has stayed true to this day. And while episodes have hinted towards this facet of his character before, this is the first one that really tackles it head on. It also shows Springfield very well, which is something that hasn't really been explored as much in the first season. It's a perfectly solid episode, solid plot, solid comedy, and strong character work. Life on the Fast Lane. This episode is similar to Homer's Odyssey in that it veers dangerously close to the too dark for its own good, with the family-friendly plot of Marge debating whether or not to cheat on Homer. I mean, it never gets that direct, but the text is there. The ending is incredibly sweet, which I like a lot, and it moves it up a tier from Homer's Odyssey for me. And the visuals, especially in Marge's dream sequence, are surprisingly good. Homer's Night Out. Another pretty disposable episode, mainly due to the fact that it's not really that funny, and the plot doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's too much suspension of disbelief for my liking. I can't see that anyone, including Marge, would get that mad at their husband for seeing a photo of him dancing on a table with a belly dancer, and it makes no sense why everyone in the town wants the photo so badly. I guess it's kind of scandalous and it's pre-internet, but it's just too much for me. The Crepes of Wrath. This has never been one of my favorite episodes, and while it's grown on me a bit as I've grown up, and I appreciate the idea of moving part of the setting to a different country, giving the animators something different to work with. But I guess my biggest issues is that I never feel I like the character of Adele as much as they want me to, and the fact that Bart doesn't really change much throughout the episode. He learns French, but besides that he's just kind of kicked around and treated badly for most of the episode, and then he arrests two criminals who were doing him wrong, and then he comes home. It's fine, but it doesn't do anything for me really. Krusty gets busted. Okay, so you can make a strong argument for this being the best episode of the first season. It is probably the best plot line, a solid mystery, and it has the first appearance of the greatest guest star in the history of the show, Kelsey Grammer's Sideshow Bob, in all of his evil glory. I'm very impressed at how quickly they managed to realize the character of Bob. He may not be an extremely complex character, but for the most part he has stayed pretty close to this characterization throughout the show's run. Plus, there's really good stuff in here about the ideas of hero worship, as well as promoting the mindset of skepticism, even if it sets you apart from the herd. A great episode for season 1. Some Enchanted Evening. Okay, after maybe the best episode of the season, the show shows one of its worst. And it's not really the show's fault, because the biggest issue is the animation. This was the first episode that they animated, but it looks so bad it's near Tracy Ullman territory. Apparently, when they received it, it was so bad that 70% of it had to be redone when it arrived due to a miscommunication of what the showrunners were looking for. It was so bad at a point that the producers threatened to abort the series if the next episodes turned out this badly. And while for the most part the animation is passable, you can definitely notice the 30% and it's not good. The plot itself is fine, but the animation is really what you remember. Season 1's a mixed bag, and I think more than anything at its best it produces some really great and memorable moments, which is a good starting point, and they clearly managed to evolve those moments into full-fledged great episodes later on, and it does set the basis for what will eventually become one of the greatest TV shows of all time. But as what it is, it's very down the middle. To give it a rating, I would say that season 1 of The Simpsons is a 6 out of 10. And these are my rankings for the episodes in season 1.